Hello, and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, a podcast for manufacturing professionals. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to get new episodes delivered to your inbox every week. I'm your host, SME Senior Editor Michael McConnell. I'm joined today by SME Contributing Editor Kip Hansen. We're going to be discussing Kip's recent article, Why Buy a Printer? And before we get started, Kip, I wanted to just to fill in our listeners if they don't know you, if they haven't read all your contributions to our publications. But you've been a contributor to SME for quite a while. Can you give us a little background about how you found yourself in the industry and what you've done?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've been with SME for a little over 10 years now. To answer your question, how I got started in manufacturing, I actually took a job when I was 16 years old as a shop helper in a place that made big food processing equipment. And They told me I was too young to drive a fork truck, so I ended up going back to school and ended up working in a machine shop late after graduation. This is back when paper tape was a big deal, and kind of worked my way up into programming and as department lead, and then I ended up leaving there. Took a job with a machine tool distributor, and learned an awful lot about different types of equipment, including 3D printing, a little bit, anyways. And then it was probably around somewhere around 1998. I saw an ad in the back of one of the trade publications. I think it was Cutting Tool Engineering, and they said, "Are you an engineer who likes to write?" And I definitely like to write. I know if I was an engineer or not, but they took me on, and I did some articles for them. Um, yeah, and after that, I went into ERP consulting for about 10 years, and then went back to writing in 2010 or so. And that's pretty much what I've been doing full time for the past 15 years or so.
Well, we're really honored that you're a regular contributor to our publication. So let's dive in a little bit about this article about why buy a printer. You took a different tack with this. You decided to crowdsource this as opposed to calling up a handful of shops and getting their one-on-one opinions. What made you decide to go that route?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've interviewed dozens upon dozens of different machine tool or 3D printer manufacturers and resellers and so on. I don't get the chance to talk to the end users very often, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But basically, it's hard to get people to the phone. They're busy and so on. So, anyways, I reached out. I started thinking, well, why not LinkedIn? And so I did kind of a shout out there, and I got a few responses there, but I wasn't real successful. So I reached out to Paul Van Meter. He has a ERP software, and I know he's real active on LinkedIn. I said, "Say, hey, Paul, do you know any of the folks that might be able to respond to this?" And he kicked the bushes a little bit, and man, they just started flying in, and I ended up with about 12 or 13 shops that had started down the 3D printing journey, or were many years with it in the rearview mirror, but got a real nice array, or eclectic array of responses and applications.
Well, we're going to dive into that in a few minutes, but on a high level overview, what surprised you most about the responses that you did get from these various shops?
I was surprised how many shops had just decided to get just call it a cheap printer. You can get a printer for $1,000, which is something I actually thought about doing, just to play with it. And it was, and as you'll see in a few minutes here, what surprised me the most was the broad variety of applications and the value they got out of it once they started using it. It was real interesting. Some of the things that they came up with just really surprised the hell out of me.
The 3D printers vary quite a bit in price, don't they?
They sure do. Like I said, you can get one for under $1,000. I don't know how great it is, but even a couple $1,000, you get a pretty decent printer. It wouldn't be considered production grade by any means, but certainly enough to tinker with. And then you just get up in the 10 or 20,000 range. Also, you got a pretty damn good printer, and then you can easily spend $100,000 or even $1 million on a metal sintering system. So it's all over the place.
These businesses that you were talking to, were their investments, did they own 3D printers at a variety of price points themselves?
Most of them were on the lower price range. I know at least one of them said they wanted to get into metal printing, which is easily $80,000 and up. But they were all on the lower price range. I would say most of them were sub $10,000 printers. Of course, several of them had ended up buying. I think one of them had like 6 printers that they had scattered around in some of different facilities and so on. So it was all over the place, but mostly on the lower end.
At this stage of their journey, I guess, for lack of a better term, were they looking, is this basically education, wanting to try something out, or were they seriously looking at return on investment, or how are they gonna pay for this piece of equipment when you talk with them?
I would say most of them were just curious. And again, it's not that much money, and they probably saw what some of their friends were doing, and people in magazines and so on with different applications, and they figured, hey, I'll just try it. It's not going to cost that much, and a few of them went into it with the prototyping in mind, and they did, but then they found out other uses for it as well.
Were most of the people you spoke to, were they pretty happy with they're glad they made that investment? Were they disappointed? Did they, run the gamut there?
I would say they were all very happy that they made the investment. I know one of them had bought a printer several years back and never really did anything with it. And then he ended up hiring a younger guy that had the 3D printing bug and was doing stuff at home. And then after that, they've really gone crazy with it, and everyone is really happy with. I'd say overall, they were all happy with their decision to take this path.
Well, some of the I know a number of the people you spoke to said they, the printer paid for itself pretty quickly, almost immediately in some cases. Did they get into what was the payback? Was it time? Was it money? Something else?
I think it, w- the overarching theme through it all was better organization, and also the ability to do 5S, lean tools around the shop. That was a big one as well. I know one of them was printing bar feed liners for their spindle, which was interesting to me, and I had to think about it for a minute, how they would do that or why, but it made sense once I dug into a little bit. So and I think a lot of them did a little bit of prototyping on the side as well. So no one really put their finger on a job that they were able to pay for the printer. But again, it wasn't that big of an investment, so no big deal.
Does using a 3D printer, require do you have to be a certain kind of shop to do that? Is there a culture fit for that kind of a thing, or is that really not the case? It could work for any shop.
Well, I think most manufacturing folks like to tinker and figure things out a lot of times on their own. And 3D printing, I think, requires a certain mindset there. You've got to be able to, it's not like picking up a CNC machine that's been around, they've been around for what, 40 some years now. And there's a lot of information and a lot of people that know how to use them. You don't have quite that level of support with 3D printing, especially when you're going in on your own with with a low cost printer. You got to figure some stuff out and do some work after hours and figure out how to program it and how to orient the parts. And I mean, there's a lot of little things you got to learn along the way, but I think it's very doable for the average, average quote unquote machinist or engineer.
But it does sound like there's some degree of buy-in. You gotta want this.
Oh yeah, I think you definitely got to want it and get excited about it. And I think once you get the first few print jobs under your belt, I'm sure it's like, wow, let's do more. It's not that hard. Let's go, keep going down that road.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. In the article that you wrote, a few of the people you spoke to said they admitted that they were kind of skeptical about this whole thing, whether they needed it, whether it was something that was going to be useful for their company. So what changed to go from that? Why do we need this mindset to like this is great, we can't live without it. Why don't we do this sooner?
Well, I think the ones that were skeptical probably got that first couple printers or print jobs under their belt and said, "Oh, this ain't that hard," and then they started immediately seeing all the other stuff that they could do with it. So, I think the skepticism evaporates very quickly once you get over that initial hurdle.
And, a few minutes ago, we talked about the price range for these and how they really run the gamut. Um, do and some of the shop owners you spoke to suggested starting small. How often do companies overbuy? Do they is that common or not?
In this context, I think no. Um, I think the shops that there's a long learning curve, and I've heard that, not just for the purpose of this article, but in a lot of the folks that I've spoken with previously. Good rule of thumb, if you want to get serious about 3D printing and go into it as a business, let's say you spend $500,000 on a metal printer. They tell you figure on about a year of not making anything, of just learning how it works, and getting all the required skill level. That's probably gotten easier over the years. But these guys, not so much. It wasn't such a big deal, and they didn't really need to justify it.
You had mentioned lean manufacturing a couple minutes ago as well. How do 3D printers fit into that?
Well, 5S is a big part of it. You can print out, custom fixtures that hang your wrenches on the board. You can make little holders for your, micrometer. It's just a lot of tools. I mean, one of them did, and I mentioned it in the article. He did I think it was a 1 minute walkthrough of his entire shop, and he pointed at about 100 different things in that they built in the shop, anywhere from pen and pencil holders, which sounds dumb, to clips for holding work instructions. I mean, there was just a lot of stuff there, and it's the same thing. Once you start doing it, it's like, wow, yeah, I could build that for this and this and this, and pretty soon you've got the printer running all the time.
I mean, you joked about the pencil holders, but you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, why not? And yeah, it's dumb. You go down to the office supply store and buy one for $5, but you don't learn anything that way. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits. It gets you thinking.
Well, you tying into the pencil holders again, you talked about in the article about organization being a use case, and that's pencil holders is something to organize pencils. So organization is a lot of what people are using these printers for.
Well, here's a really good example, and this is one of the things that came out that I thought was really cool. You walk into a lot of machine shops, and they put their parts in egg crates, and I did it for years, and they're still doing it today. Um, you set the parts in there. You may have 30 parts in an egg crate, depending on the size, but it's not a great solution. They get oil soaked and they get weak, and all of a sudden you got parts rolling across the ground and so on. Um, several of the shops that I spoke with for this thing, they had ended up actually printing custom replacements for those egg crates and to hold all the parts, and then they would they would engrave or print the part number into the holder, into the fixture, and I thought that was overkill, but then they described how they never lost parts anymore. They didn't have to count things anymore. There wasn't one pocket missing. It was just a really good example of organizational skills, and the printer runs by itself. So why not? All you're doing is paying for the material at that point.
And something else that want to ask you about is, obviously there's a certain percentage of people out there with 3D printers that are hobbyists, but this is moving from hobby to actually producing things. Uh, how does that process work when people make that evolution, if they do make that evolution?
I know. I guess if your hobby is making stuff, I mean, it's a natural segue. And again, I think a lot of machine shop people and sheet metal people, they like to make stuff, and if you can make your own products that make your shop more efficient and do it without a whole lot of work, um, I think it's a great step forward.
And several of the people that contributed to your article talked about a progression of what they're doing, from entry level filament printers to SLS, metal, resin. What are the signs the shop is ready to move up market?
Well, I mean, pretty much everyone. I'm trying to think back now. They were all FDM printers. Those are the inexpensive ones where you've got. I could be wrong on that, but I mean, that's the logical entry point is FDM, where you're feeding out a reel of a plastic feedstock. If you're gonna go into real, quote unquote, real 3D printing, I mean, you're gonna need to get into an SLS printer or a metal printer, a carbon machine, that sort of thing, just for the speed and accuracy. I didn't mention SLA. I mean, that's another great entry point because of the resolution and the accuracy that's possible with that. But those machines, they're all of a sudden you're up into the $50,000-$60,000 range easily, and then that's a lot more money that you're going to spend for just something to tinker around with and learn about the technology.
Sure, sure. Uh, After speaking to all these contributors and getting their takes on things, what's your advice to a shop owner who's still on the fence about the technology?
Do it. I mean, really, what if you've got someone, or maybe the shop owner, him or herself, is interested in it, but if you've got someone in the shop that has that mindset that likes to tinker and is good at figuring stuff out, and they're interested in it, turn them loose, because as these shops have shown, it helps you get more organized. Yeah, I think once people start doing it, they start to see the value, and all of a sudden, you want 3 or 4 or 5 printers, which happened with a couple of these shops, and because they found so many cool uses for it that one printer couldn't keep up, or maybe they wanted a larger one to do larger parts, larger fixtures, stuff like that. So, yeah, just do it. You got, because this is yeah, I'm not going to say that 3D printing, I'll never say 3D printing is going to replace machining like people were thinking, 35 years ago, but it's definitely just another tool in the toolbox, and it's a good tool.
We should mention the other side. Is there what kind of shops probably don't need a printer, or at least don't need one yet, if they're trying to size up their needs?
Um, I don't know if I can point to a shop that, I mean, sure, I'm thinking like an automaker, or someone that's doing high volume manufacturing. maybe not. I come from a job shop, so that's where my mind automatically goes. The high mix, low volume. We've got a lot of different stuff going on. Um, maybe the higher volume shop that wouldn't, but even there, you could still use a 3D printer to print out a plastic replica of a part that you're quoting, because it's really nice to be able to hold something in your hand and look at it and see how are you going to fixture that thing. What attack angle are you going to use when you're programming it. You can do some of that with a solid model on your screen, but there's nothing like holding that part in your hand. So where I'm going with this is, even in a high volume shop, I would see a lot of value just for that use for quoting purposes. Again, if you can spend $1,000, uh, set the thing loose at night, come back the next morning, you've got a part you can hold in your hands, and you win a $100,000 order because you quoted it more accurately. Um, that pays for itself right there.
Okay. Well, if you were going to do a follow up article on your on this article, why buy a printer, in say 5 years, what do you think is going to have changed in that time?
Within 5 years, it's just going to become that much more prevalent. They'll become that much easier to use. There will be more and more materials available. And not that there's any shortage of feedstocks for 3D printers now, but there's more coming out all the time. And obviously, uh, with volume, the prices tend to come down. And I think you're going to have more people, potential hires on the market that will have had some experience with it. So it'll just get easier as time goes on, and more necessary, I think, due to the way that the industry is going.
Is there anything that you expect in 5 years will not have changed? Maybe it will later, but not in that 5 year window.
No, not really. Again, I think it's just become more of a accepted tool, and I think it'll, for as far as for the industry overall, just being able to make lean easier will be good for the industry. Do you have to have a 3D printer to do that? No, but it makes it a little bit easier to do so. So I really think it's just 5 years from now, it's just me more, better, faster, cheaper.
Anything else that you want to add that we have not covered in our conversation today?
Well, like after the article was released in the print, I did do a shout out on LinkedIn to everyone that was involved. Um, I want to thank, if they're listening, I want to thank them again. I know everyone's busy, and some of them gave me more content than I could use. It was just really, really thorough responses and some great tips and ideas more than anything else, to people that might be interested in doing this, and why they should.
Well, Kip, thank you so much for joining us today. It was very interesting. You gave a lot of great information. I think our listeners are really going to appreciate it.
Yeah, if anyone is listening and they want to reach out to me or to any of the other contributing editors, I encourage you to do so. We love doing case studies with shops, and I mean, you guys are who we're writing for, and it'd be great to hear from you.
Good points. Thanks, Kip.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
And to keep up with the latest manufacturing trends and to hear more podcasts, subscribe to our podcast feed. And of course, visit us at advancedmanufacturing.org. I'm SME Senior Editor Michael McConnell, and thanks for listening.